Well, shortly after Dr. Marczak was hired in August 2015, he wanted me to go on this big trip with him over to Mooresville, North Carolina. I believe you were along with us too, look at some of the things that they were doing. And this is the big dog in North Carolina, Mooresville, North Carolina. And when Dr. Marczak wanted me to go on this trip, I thought, yeah, right, you know, they got a ton of money. They're sitting on a big gold mine, and it's like the Williamson County of North Carolina. So I didn't really think too much about it when we went. But when I got there, I was stunned. Mooresville, North Carolina looks like any town in southern Middle Tennessee. It reminded me the most of Lawrenceburg. I also found out they didn't have a ton of money. Almost, well, they told me at the time, every one of the schools were Title I. Now, what does that mean? That just means they've got a lot of poor kids. But yet, they are leading the state as far as academics. Now, outside, I'll tell you, the buildings weren't impressive. It looked a little bit run down to me. It wasn't up to my standard. Classrooms were actually pretty crowded. We would probably hyperventilate if we could see the classrooms, how many students were in there with teachers. But inside those classrooms, I finally saw Dr. Marczak's vision of where he wants to take us. It's something very intangible. It's very hard to describe what I saw in those classrooms. But it's something that when you see it, you absolutely know it when you see it. It wasn't the buildings, it was what was happening on the inside. It was the people. It was the teachers, the students, the administrators. It was a culture within those schools that was dynamic. Now, it wasn't a dog and pony show when I went to Mooresville. They gave us full reign. We could go into any classroom, we could talk to any teacher, and I tried to get my money's worth. I tried to talk to as many people as I could. And what I saw within those schools was a positive can-do attitude. It was everywhere. First of all, there was smiling everywhere, in every classroom. And the positivity was contagious. By the end of the trip, I almost wanted to change careers and become a teacher, to be honest with you. Now, it was nothing like our mom and dad's schools. There were no neat rows. The teacher was not at the front of the classroom. Instead, kids were everywhere. They were working on projects. They were in the floor. Some of them were spilling out in the hallways, interacting with other classrooms. It was just like kind of an open concept of students and teaching and learning that was taking place. Again, it's really hard to describe, but it was a positive can-do spirit inside those schools, inside those buildings. And I'll give you an example of that can-do attitude. Me and some of the other people that went on the trip, we peeked into one classroom, and every one of those students had an adult that was mentoring with those students. And we're like, what's going on? So we got the principal aside and like, what's happening in that classroom? And she explained to us, well, that's the kids that are struggling with reading. And each one of them's got an individual adult mentor helping them with reading. So we're like, wow, where do y'all come up with the money for that? Well, then she started explaining to us that they asked for funding for mentors with the county or the city. It's like a city district to get the funding. But what did that principal do? She could have just crossed her arms. She could have just complained. She could have just sat there in the mud. But what she did, she made lemonade out of lemons. She contacted her PTSO. They did fundraisers. They did car washes. It was a can-do spirit, and they raised the funds. Also solicited volunteers to coming in. She even explained that they pay bus drivers to just, after they drop the kids off, they give them a stipend to just hang out and mentor with the students to stay there at the school until it's time to take the kids back. So the moral of the story, afterwards I talked to those teachers about what had happened. How did this happen? How did this come about? How did you all get to this point? And they told me, first of all, it did not happen overnight. The second thing they told me is that this day would come. They said the first 3 or 5 years are going to be very bumpy. You're going to have a lot of pushback, they explained. Ultimately, they said that you'll have a lot of people that are going to leave you. And they even had a term for it. They called it blessed transfers. But what they basically told me is you have to keep your eyes on the vision. It's going to be hard, but don't let the negativity, don't let the infighting seep in. What we all have to do is stay together. and work through this. Is Dr. Marczak perfect? I'm gonna let the first person that's perfect in all things cast the first rock at him. He's made some mistakes, but his heart's in the right place. And I know that these board members, their heart's in the right place. What we want to see is what we saw in Mooresville, North Carolina. And we could be there in 3 to 5 years. But it's not going to come about by doing things like we're doing tonight. By fighting and just dredging up things and beating down and name calling, that's not going to get us there. But if we're supportive of each other and we work together, and all principals work together, all teachers work together, we have that common goal, we can see that vision fulfilled. But this is a turning point in this district. This is a turning point for this board. This is a turning point for the teachers and the parents and everybody in this county, is where do we go from here? Are we going to still hang on? It's going to be a bumpy ride. Dr. Marczak's probably going to help things. He's made some mistakes. But his heart is in the right place, and there's great things happening within our district right now. There are some bright spots. Is it there yet? No. Part of the problem that we're having now is some in the district are seeing what's happening in the other bit of the district, and they're like, hey, how come we don't have that? But the question to be asking is, how do we spread that? We need to spread the love, okay? So there's some great things happening in pockets, but we need to, now is the time to support these changes. Now's not the time to turn away from change.